Good afternoon. Session 7 of the Work the Web training program, the community training program. We are in this together, and I'm very excited that we have this fantastic project to work on. So thank you for bringing that to us, Anya and Crusader, of course, and everybody else, Tassilo, that you're here today. Great stuff. As we said at some point, I think in the beginning, the best way to learn and the best way to validate that the things you've learned are relevant is by working on real projects. So I'm very, very eager for all of us to get started with the project and start to A, refactor, B, add tests, C, add new functionality, and then everything in between, working with DevOps afterwards and continuous integration, all of that stuff. And you will hopefully see that a lot of these well, I am live on stream on Twitch. Am I? Yeah, I should be. I mean, Anya is here, and she just said hello. I don't know what that means, but it means something, I guess. Uh, am I on Twitch? Yes. Okay. You are now. Okay, good stuff. All right. Yes. Okay. Uh, so. So yeah, so I hope that we will see that all of the stuff that we are covering are relevant in one way or another. And today I'm going to talk about ReactJS. And some of you already know ReactJS, and so a lot of this stuff that I will be covering could be known to you, in a little bit of repetition. But again, repetition is the mother of all learning. But then there are some things perhaps that could be relevant. I will be using a little bit of legacy syntax that is no longer that relevant. There is another part of this talk that I will be delivering next time with the newer syntax. But I think that we should dive into React.js and see where that takes us. And the project that we will be working on is based on React, or at least includes React as part of its tech stack. So that's probably very relevant for what we will be working on. And again, we are on Twitch, so if you want to follow us there, do that. Right. We often use quotes in the beginning of our talks, as you know, and for this time around, I'm using Mark Zuckerberg for some reason. I don't know why. Big tech is usually not my first source of inspiration if I get to choose, but at some point I thought that this one was relevant. The biggest risk is not taking any risk. In a world that is changing really quickly, the only strategy that is guaranteed to fail is not taking risks. So I guess we need to take risks, and we all do, with our time, with our effort, with the choices we make, whether we choose to do something in a new tech stack or by not focusing on a specific tech stack or some solutions that are available to us. Risk is always accompanying everything we do. So yeah, there's some food for thought. Right, so let's talk about React. What is React? There's a lot of things that can be said about this library. It's a JavaScript library for creating user interfaces. It's the view in the model view controller pattern. And one thing that is often being said is that it's a library, not a framework. And I think we discussed this at some point, or I discussed this with other people, I don't know. But there is a big difference between a library and a framework. And my personal definition is that a library is something that deals with one problem set or brings solutions to one specific thing, whereas a framework is a library that is more broad than that. It provides solutions for many problems. And just as an example, I can say that Angular is a framework, whereas React and Vue are not. They are libraries because they deal with one thing and one thing only, and that is to build interfaces. Everything else uh, needs to be dealt with in other ways. But more on that later, I guess. Facts first. Do you remember this? At the end of the day, your browser understands three things and three things only, and that would be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The three components that make up everything that we see on the web. If we talk about web-based applications, so remember that everything that we do that is not vanilla JavaScript will have to be compiled into JavaScript. Everything that we do that is not CSS cannot be understood by the browser, so it needs to be compiled into CSS one way or another. And then everything that is not HTML would have to be transpiled into HTML when it hits the browser. But there are many JavaScript frameworks and libraries. There, I should have probably added the word library here. And they come with a set of pros, but also a set of cons, right? Pluses and minuses. The pros are, for instance, better application structure or code structure, because there are sets of best practices, there are guidelines, and there are examples that people let themselves be inspired by, and so on. There are some common concepts that can be shared between different systems or different applications and different developer teams, and so on. And then there are also large communities of users where you can gain new knowledge, or you can leverage on other people's mistakes or achievements. There's a lot of documentation and bug fixes and all of that stuff, right? But there is also a set of cons. There is always a learning curve to get into a new framework or a new library. There is a little bit of setup, infrastructure, and tweaking and all of that stuff. And there's also a minimum requirements for size. So performance-wise, using a library for a simple Hello World application is probably not that optimal from a performance perspective. You would probably be better off if you just do plain vanilla JavaScript and HTML. But a very simple application in React does require an amount of megabytes and so on. So again, if the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, then the entire world starts looking like a nail. So you should probably know at least a few libraries and a few frameworks, to have more tools in your toolbox, so you can choose the right one for the right job. And knowing this is, of course, extremely hard in the beginning, but after a while, with experience, you can determine if one framework is actually the good one for you. But enough about that. Let's dive into this fantastic logo type. This reminds me of the Watchmen and Dr. Manhattan. This is the logo for React. I love it. Feels futuristic. Anyway, so React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. Created by Facebook. There's this fantastic guy on the core team of React called Dan Abramov, very atomic, of course, and it's a very vibrant library that there's a lot of development happening in the ecosystem and so on. The good thing here is there are a few things that are very unique for React, and we can go on about technical stuff the entire day, and I will try not to do that too much because I want to focus on the coding part. But it is component based, which is a good thing. We're going to talk about what that means. It is declarative. I'm going to cover what that is, and then there is this paradigm, or this idea of learning once and write anywhere. that is also an interesting part of the React way of thinking, or how they structure the library. One thing that, if we talk about components, for instance, if we and there's much to say about component-based frameworks and libraries, but one thing that differs component-based libraries from traditional way of building web-based applications is the separation of concerns. In principle, in components, we try to embed all those three technologies that the web consists of, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and kind of blur the separation between those two. Whereas in a traditional way of developing, you had your JavaScript files, you had your CSS, and you had your HTML, the presentation layer, and that is turned not upside down, but at least tilted to the side in libraries like Vue, React, and in also in Angular, I guess. So let's talk a little bit about the declarative versus imperative programming. I love this kind of stuff personally, so let's see if I can bore you to death. Now, these are two different paradigms or approaches to programming, where imperative is the more classical one, and declarative feels a little bit modern. It's all about the layer of or level of abstractions. So in imperative programming, you basically tell your computer or the computer through your program, which is a set of instructions, right? Every single step that needs to be performed in order to achieve a specific outcome. So imperative programming focuses on how the program operates and what it needs to happen. And that's where algorithms come into play. You have data in, data out, and all of that stuff. Very traditional. Declarative programming is on that is quite different, because you try to focus on the overall objective of the software that you're writing or building, and it doesn't really matter in what order you perform your functions and executions. Only that what you care about is that the outcome is what you expect it to be, right? And somebody made this comparison to making coffee, right? Now, there are certain components that you need to have in order to be able to make coffee. You need water, you need coffee, a grainer perhaps, somewhere to heat up, a source of heat, some container where you can brew the coffee, and so on. And these are things that are needed to actually make a cup of coffee. And so given you have those things, you can make that your cup of coffee in different ways. Perhaps I brew my coffee differently than Carl does, and then so on. We're all different. We have different tastes, but the outcome will still be that coffee will be made one way or another. So in declarative programming, if we would use this analogy, you just make those components available to the person that is supposed to make the coffee, and leave it up to him or her how to make it. Whereas in imperative way of thinking, you would actually not only give them those components, but also write a list. Do this, do that, step by step, right? And of course, if you are a hipster and you think that your way of making coffees is the best way, then this analogy won't work. But I think we all understand what's going on. Everything else is false, of course. So that's about that. If you think about this a bit simplified in the React, you try not to think how you want to accomplish a result, but instead focus on what the component, which is a piece of user interface, should look like in its new state. And when it comes to React, the way of thinking, or the way you should, a mantra you should adopt, is to start to think about the end in mind. Always focus at the end result, which, by the way, plays well with the behavior-driven design approach, and also test-driven design approach to programming. Right. As soon as I use an analogy, the chat just go crazy about those things. But yeah, you should do this and that. All right. Anyway, if you want to read more about this, and again, I will send this out to you guys in PDF format, uh, there is a great article on Codeverse.io about declarative versus imperative programming. The interesting part here is that in React, when we code, when we create React applications, we mix those styles. Sometimes you need to do imperative vanilla JavaScript, and you do imperative programming then, and declarative in your components and so on. And what I promote is a separation. So if you know that you will use an algorithm or very specific set of instructions, or give your code your application specific set of step-by-step instructions, you should extract that into a module or an action or what have you. Whereas you keep the good React stuff inside of the components. That's the way I look at it. If you take a look at component-based frameworks or libraries, it is a style of development, of software development, that focuses on creating small self-contained pieces that can be strung together, pieces of software that can be strung together to build user interfaces. And that can be reused. So if you can extract it, you extract it. If you can contain a piece of logic that ends up modifying the user interface for whoever is using your application, you should do that. And that creates very modular, very small, easy to maintain applications that can scale in a good way. And then there is the third one about the learn once, write anywhere, which is an enormous topic. I'm just going to touch upon this really quickly. There has been this idea that if we could only find a programming language that could be used on multiple platforms, multiple devices, and in multiple environments, that would be a good thing. It has been the holy grail of software development for many years, and Java was an attempt to do that. There are other attempts to kind of unify development across multiple platforms, and many developers did find out that, for instance, at least with Java, as a universal language, you can write once, but then you have to debug all over the place. But however, React kind of brings that closer to reality in one way. You can build applications using ReactJS or its cousin, React Native, on multiple devices. But that is a little bit beside the point. What is the big thing that we should consider ourselves with is that JavaScript is eating the world in a way. Like, if you think about where web-based applications can be run today, there are multiple use cases for that. Of course, the desktop and mobile, but then you have the Internet of Things and the smart devices. And if there isn't a web server or a web client in your coffee machine or your fridge or your iron that you use to iron your clothes, if it's not there today, there will be one in a short while. Probably everything will be interconnected, and JavaScript will probably be the language of choice for all of these platforms, for good and for bad. Because that, if we continue this, then we have to go into the distributed web, and that's not today's topic probably. So why choose React? It's fairly easy to get started. It's declarative, which is good, predictable, confidence, reliability, all of this stuff that is the selling points that the guys that created React like to push out. But from my perspective as programmer, but also as a coach, because I do train new developers or junior developers, I can tell you that a lot of people find React to be a fairly easy framework or easy library to get started with. It's it doesn't take too much time to learn the basic concepts of React and learn the building blocks of it, because it's so small. It doesn't deal with so many things, right? So React is not a big framework in any way. And then you have to think in React, think in components, think in user interfaces, and abandon the imperative way of doing things, and embrace the declarative one. And that takes a while, mainly practicing to build stuff together. And then if you want to do very advanced things in React, well, everything that is advanced will be hard. So that will take some time, of course. But the learning curve is not super steep. You can get into it. You can start working. And I mean, we did an example in React the other day when we set up Cypress, and I think most of you guys did manage to go through that, even on 1.75 speed. So that should work out for you. Now, there are two main components or building blocks in what is 0.75? Okay, there are two main building blocks in React: the components and component state. Components can be made out of even smaller parts, smaller components that are built in, or custom ones that you create yourself. And the state drives what the guys at the Facebook and the React core team call one-way reactive data flow. Fancy dancy. Basically, the user interface will react to every change of state. Okay, and here comes the declarative kind of part, right? Because if you set your state of your component to true, let's say logged in, logged in false in the beginning when you load it, then you perform an authentication and you change the state to logged in true, then you can condition what should be visible based on that state. And as soon as that state is toggled from false to true, React will automatically re-render the component. And so you don't have to deal with this yourself. You only tell React, what do I want my user to see if he is logged in, or when he is not logged in. So that is the end, the user-driven focus on the end result way of thinking. So the user interface will react to every change of state. Bear that with you in mind, because components are like state machines. And you have to think about them like that. So by thinking of a user interface as being in various type of state, and considering what they would look like when they are rendered, it is fairly easy to keep your user interface relatively constant. And in React, you simply again update the component state, and then you get a new set of a user interface based on that new state in this virtual DOM process. And then React itself as a library will update your document object model, make the necessary adjustments, and showcase and show the end user what it needs to show, and what the user interface should look like. And you do not have to concern yourself with that. But components are also functions, and I think I mentioned this last time around, that just like functions, when they take parameters and return some data, some results, components, they take values, and instead of data they return user interface, parts of user interface at least. And as functions, if you pass in the same data to a function, it will return the same result. The same thing with the component. If you pass in the same properties or same arguments, it will render the same user interface for you, which is important to remember. So there's no magical thing going on. Data in, data out, parameters in or values in, user interface out. That is really important. And if we take a look at Hello World, And this is legacy. So we're using a class component, which is something that I want you guys at least to know about, so you won't get surprised when you work with some legacy applications. And when I say legacy in this context, we're talking 2 years or 3 years old. You know, that is considered old in this world. You have a class definition. You inherit a lot of behavior from a class that is called component in React, and then you have a render method that basically returns. Then you return a piece of HTML, and that HTML that you return is actually not HTML per se, but rather JSX. We're going to talk about this in just a second. So pretty easy. You just instantiate this class and you have this div with hello world inside. Not much to it. But functional components are here for the win, of course. They're not as legacy as class components. And there are two versions or main versions that, of these things. They do not have a specific render method. Because they are the render method in themselves, right? So you could use this arrow function, Gsx arrow function syntax, or you can use the more traditional functional function keyword to declare them. And again, as every function, they take arguments that are by convention called props in React. So if we take a look at how a React application actually can be rendered, or how its life cycle inside of a browser, it's very simple. I kind of covered this last time around, but it's worth repeating. A browser can only understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It needs an HTML page to load, otherwise it won't know what to do. So you always have an entry point, as I often refer to it, in the public folder of a React application that is called index.html. That's what's going to be rendered by the or loaded by the browser. And inside of that particular HTML file, you have one specific div that by convention has an ID of root, but it can have any ID whatsoever. But your entire React app will live in that particular div. And yes, I've experimented just because some students ask me, what if we have two roots or two different divs, and we refer, we use we can play around with this to display our apps in two different places. You can do that if you want. I don't see any use case for it, but you can in principle. And so if you read through this little code snippet, there is a div with an ID of root, and that is where we will render our components. And the components are like a tree, a hierarchy. There is a root component, often called app, and then you have children of that one and children of children. So if we look at the way you can tap into this HTML file, this is one way of doing this. You include the React library and the component module. In this particular case, you create a hello world component where you just say hello world. It's a class component in this case, and then you have this snippet where you tell React DOM to render the component, that is the first argument, inside of an element that you get using vanilla JavaScript. This document get element by ID root, which is part of the HTML file, and that is how you connect those two, the component with the HTML file, and boom, it shows up in the browser. It's of course not that easy because again, you have to use Babel to compile it to JavaScript and all of that stuff. But in principle, this is the process. And then that brings me to the Gsx syntax, and that is a preprocessor of of JavaScript and XML or HTML. You can mix HTML syntax and JavaScript together, and that is what the components, once they are being rendered, or once they're being executed, sorry, that's what they return. However, you don't have to use Gsx syntax if you don't want to. I don't see a use case why you wouldn't like to use that, because it simplifies things extremely much. But you can omit this part if you really, for some reason, would like to do that. And since we are, when we work with React, we often use the create React app scaffolder, and that comes with Babel and Webpack, everything pre-configured, because JSX needs to be compiled, so it can be understood by the browser. But we usually don't have to worry about that if we use create React app. Now, Gsx syntax is important to understand, and one thing that is really important are the curly braces or brackets that escape from JSX, from this XML syntax, into normal JavaScript expressions. And just a very simple example in this component here, if you set, if you have a constant, again, in this case, it's called some string. If you want to display this, we do that by inserting that value with curlies around it. But you can also execute JavaScript directly in JSX. So if you look at this 28 plus 14, that will not be displayed, but the value of this addition will be displayed in the browser. Just as some examples. There are a few things that differ from HTML and JSX. If you want to assign classes to your HTML tags, you have to use the it is called class name in camel case in JSX, and not class. JSX doesn't understand that property or attribute. And you also have to use capitalization to differentiate between the built-in HTML elements and React components. So if the first letter of your tag is a lowercase letter, then React will assume that this is an HTML element. But if it's a capital one, if you use real Pascal case where the first letter is capitalized, then React assumes that this will be a component. So for instance, if you create a component and you accidentally name it my component, with a small m in the beginning, that won't fly. That will not render properly in your browser. So you have to follow certain naming standards in React. Okay. Now props, which are, I did tell you that components, they accept values or attributes, and they are called props. So if you want to pass in some data from one component to another, you do that as props. And the interesting part with props is that they are read-only. You cannot modify it. They are immutable, and they are combined into a single object and accessible in class components with they're bound to the instance, right? So you say this props, and then whatever you want to pass in. And you can pass in basically anything as a property of a component. Of course, all the primitives, objects, array functions, and the other component types, and so on, which is quite flexible and allows you to do a lot of things if you don't choose to use application state, which is far more better to do. So React is based on JavaScript. JavaScript does not have strong typing. You could use, and can and should in principle in modern applications use React with TypeScript. So you can use strong typing if you don't want to do that. There is a property types package that is kind of an alternative to TypeScript, but it's a little bit outdated. That's why I kind of put it in cursive, because it's not really relevant anymore. But strong typing is a good thing generally. And this is just an example of how you can pass in properties from one component to another. So the hello world component here accepts properties like planet. So if you want to use this in order to display this, you just say this props planet. That is how you access that particular value. But again, this is legacy. It works slightly different in functional components. Now, again, this is also a bit legacy, but it's worth understanding that apart from properties, you have state in components. True or false, or you can store arrays or any type of data in state. So initial state is defined in a constructor for ES6 class components, and available to you using this .state syntax. Never seen anyone push anything inside render. This is just an example. This is pseudocode. So there's a return statement that is kind of missing here. Now, state is also a read only, or it's not read only because it can be modified, but you should only read from state directly. When you modify it, you should use the set state function that is built in or made available for you in those ES6 class components. And every time you use set state, then it triggers a re-render of that particular component, and not the entire page, but that particular part of the user interface. And if you want to use state in a functional component, then you need to use the new addition. Well, new, it's not that new because it's been around for 2 years, I guess, that allows us to use state in functional components, that is encapsulated in the use state hook of React. So we will look at that later. But originally, state was only available in class components. Functional components were considered a little dumb. They did only render user interface without being able to be modified too much. But nowadays we can use the hooks to use state in the functional components as well. And if we take a look at what we can do here in terms of updating state, so if we read through this code a little bit, we import React and the component from the React library. Then we define the counter class. It extends a component. Then we have a constructor, a bit simplified, but this is not pseudocode. This is actually working code at this stage, at least. And we set the counter to 0 initially when the component is being mounted and rendered for the first time. Then we defined a function that is called onClick for some reason. And what this function does when invoked is that it updates state and the counter property with whatever it was before plus 1. Okay, so if it's 0 first, then we just do then we do 0 plus 1, and that would be 1, and then next time it will be 2, and so on, right? And so in the render method, we say that the constant counter is derived from state using the destruct method, and then in the return statement we were just saying button was click counter times, and then if it's 0, then it says 0 times. If state is if counter is 1, it says 1 times, and so on. And then we just have a button that has an on-click event listener that every time you click on it, you invoke the on-click function, and that's how this works basically. Every time you click on it, the on-click is being invoked, state is being updated, and then the entire component is being re-rendered pretty much. And so again, you don't really focus on how we are displaying this, only that we are, the fact that we are displaying the value of counter on our user interface. And then we have extremely long example that I will not talk you through, but if you want to go through this, you can do that using the PDF, because this one will take too long to do. But basically what we are doing here is that we create an array with names, and we have 3 different functions that filters through this array and removes some instances based on some very simple logic, and updates state to it. And the only thing the return statement cares about is, if we look at this UL list that is almost at the bottom of the return statement, is just rendering that particular list. And if that list has been modified, we just re-render. We keep on re-rendering the component. And those 3 buttons that we are displaying invoke different methods to remove or add instances to that array. And even though this looks like a lot of code, in vanilla JavaScript that code would be considerably longer and look completely different from this implementation. Yeah, some great speakers. There's a lot of Carls there. No Carls. There are a lot of Scots though. All right.
Sorry, Thomas.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
I don't know about everyone else, but I would feel it would be a good time for a little break.
I was just about to say that, but good stuff. I was thinking that we take a 5-minute now, and then we can do some Q&As if you want, or we can see some code again. Is that okay? Raisin asks if I'm a fan of using class components or function components. Just an answer to Pedro: functional components all the way. So if there's any class components in our project, I will definitely advocate for refactoring them. All right, let's take a short break. See you soon, folks. The Twitch will be on, but I will just take a break and stretch my legs. Be back soon.
I need to go, so I will. What's the rest on the what, guys?
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Are we doing small talk, people, or are we silent?
Silent.
No.
Busy reading emails.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. How am I doing on? I'm doing okay.
Oh yeah,
on memory.
almost.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where do you get your music from?
My
The one on Twitch.
my music.
Yeah.
From Spotify. It's a playlist with royalty-free music because I got slapped on my fingers from
Oh, you
From-
did?
from Twitch and from YouTube at some point. So
What?
there was like, at least on YouTube when I uploaded. No, even on Twitch they mute some of my. I mean, in the beginning when I started to stream, there was like, oh, your audio is muted on the VODs, because of some copyright infringement, and so I and then if Twitch didn't spot it, then when I uploaded them to YouTube, YouTube was like, oh, you have to do something about this, or yada yada. So I googled, or not googled, but I searched on YouTube for royalty-free music. So I found some, some jazz. I'm a great fan of. The older I get, the more blues and jazz I listen to, and so I have some soft music in the background. Sometimes I play a little bit of heavy metal. It depends on what mood I am in. But yeah, but I can send you, if you're interested, I can send you those playlists, Shima.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Not the heavy metal ones though.
Not the metal. Okay. Well.
Yeah, no.
All right. Well. So and I yeah. So I'm gonna post my link to my channel. Whoa. There we go. Stop. Right. In chat here, I think my YouTube account is there. Right. Okay. Shall we do some coding? What time is it? It's 20. So we have like 30 minutes or something. It depends when we have to go. Right. So let's download this as a PDF. Send this out in chat, in Slack. And for those of you who are not members of the Agile Ventures Slack, sorry, it's your loss, but you should join. Work the web, right? Where is that fucking thing? There it is. Come on, give me a break. I don't want to see it. I've seen this before already. Yeah, perhaps I can send this later. Right. Code, yes, code. Gotcha. Here we are. Agile Ventures. We did something in terms of my first React app, right? So we're gonna use that one. Or do you want? I mean, there's no reason for us to go through the not so painful, but still a process of setting up the React application. I don't know if you guys followed along on setting this up. Hopefully you did. If not, you're gonna have to watch the recording of the previous session. I think that is the best course of action. I guess check that out. But let's pop this open and think about what we just said before. Right? Let's close this. I will not run my tests now. This, we will spend these 20-25 minutes to just do a little bit of hacking. I will show you a little bit about those class components, those dreaded class components, and how you can achieve the same functionality in functional components, or so you understand the difference between those two, right? We did take a look. This is an application based on the Create React App scaffolder. I did clean this up myself, removed all the unnecessary things, just to keep it simple. We have the index HTML. If we remove the comments, there's not much here. The most important part, or the only important part in this HTML file, is this div. You know, that the one that I spoke about, the one that has this ID of root. And I see that we have a question in Twitch about my extensions, and I use quite a lot of them because I work in both Ruby and in JavaScript and in React. So yeah, and Mobot thinks it's Saturday. I know, it's my fault. But the one that is most important for the things that we will do today is this ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets. That is the one that I think is the best one to use for React, personally. Right. So in my source folder, I have this app.jsx. You remember I renamed this to JSX because this is a component. It's going to be a React thing and return some JSX, and therefore I would like to keep that separated by just having this suffix JSX on it. And this one is the one I created last time around. It's a functional component that uses those two hooks, useEffect and useState. So if I would now, just for the sake of it, create a new one that is called, let's call it classic app. It's going to be a class component, okay? And we will do the same thing as we're doing in this one, fetching the users and displaying them in a list item. Then we can see how different they are, basically. So if I go to the classic app and I do Royal Air Force Classic, let's see, I have some snippets here. React class component. What is that? Right, let's. Why is that? Let's use this one. Right. So why do you add this twice? You don't have to add this twice. Right. So this would be a basic scaffolder of this of a class component. We import React, but we also, instead of importing those hooks, we import the component module from React, and we're just saying that we creating this classic app, and it extends this specific. It extends the component, right? And again, I can use fragments here if I want, which I guess I should do. And what did we have here? We had users and message as state. So the users were an empty array in the beginning, and the message was an empty string. So in a class component, we can use this syntax. Using a constructor like this, but also we don't even have to use that, to be honest. We can just say state equals an object, and here we will say users, and that would be an empty array, and message would be an empty string to start with. So this syntax here creates the initial state and uses users and message, and this is the equivalent, partially at least, of this, where we are using the use state hook. So we don't want to do that. I can now take this fetch users function, or at least the content of that, and create a method that will be an asynchronous async method fetch users like this, and just paste this in. This will be the same functionality, but we can't use this syntax because we don't have these methods available. What we need to do, instead of set users, which was modifying state before, by the way, we need to import Axios from Axios. Go ahead, Anya.
Yeah, just wanted to ask again those error.response.status text or response.data. Where do they come from exactly?
From the response, actually. In this particular case, when we access these API users from RecRes, right? Let me just pull this up on screen. Well, actually, I can do this instead. If I make a new request to this API, this is a GET request, right? Then what I will be getting back is this object, right? And so the request data is the content, the body of the request. And the boring thing, the confusing thing here is that, you see, the users are inside of the data or data key. You understand? So that's why it says, request data is the body of the request, and then we need only this part. So therefore, we will say request data. Do you understand? So that's how that is thing. Yeah. So this is Thunder client is like Postman, but a little better, actually, in my opinion. So you can make requests directly from VS Code. So in the functional component using, I don't know if this answers your question, Anya, by the way.
Yes, I was just unable to get this error.response.status text, but I guess I'll just have a look at it again.
And did you stub it out?
You mean with the intercept? Or
yeah.
I think so, but I guess I'll just compare again my code with the previous version and.
Okay. If you do an intercept is like this, then you should get that error message.
With status code, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good
Thanks.
stuff. All right. So in a functional component, when we use hooks, we use this set users, which is something that we create ourselves, right? In this app.js, up here. Now here, if we want to modify state, we say set state. This set state, sorry, and then it's a function, and now we want to modify the object, and that would be users, and then response data, because we're not interested in the entire object, but only the part that contains the data, the users, right? So this is the difference. You say this state, and then you modify this this object that initially had an empty array. Now it will have the array that we got from the response. And also Here, if we want to set the message, then we say this set state and then an object, and then we say message, and then this error response status text. Right. Okay. So that's what it does. Now, how do we invoke this method, this fetch users? We want this to be executed when we render the component. So in our functional component nowadays, we use this use effect function, which is a hook that we import. In a more classical component using classes, we have life cycle events. So the concept of life cycle events is basically tells us that there are certain things, certain events that will be triggered when the component is being handled by React. And one that is important is component did mount. So we can create a component did mount function here, and this one will be executed or will be run when the component has been mounted, as it's called, in the browser or by the system. And so we can just say this fetch users, and that's it. Then this will be or do I have to wait for it? I don't know. We'll figure it out. It's been a while. Since this is an asynchronous function, we might have to wait for this guy. We'll see. We'll see soon. And then the rest is pretty straightforward, because you remember we were iterating over this users array. We can do the same thing here inside of our render method, but we can't just say users like this. We have to say this state dot users map like we do here, and then finally we want this part of the user interface, and that is the same thing in a functional component as well as in our class component. So we just paste this in here, format our code. Oh, we need to wrap this in a parenthesis. There we go. No? Why? That should do it, right? No? Right, and then we just say this state message. Right, let's see. It looks kind of okay to me. We are importing, we have Axios around here. We have the class thing, we have the initial state, we have the asynchronous function to fetch the users. We are setting state in a traditional way, and then we have this component did mount that invokes this. Yeah, I don't know what happens here. And then when the component is mounted, we are fetching that, and then we are iterating over this. And the thing is that, you see, this method will be invoked on the first call of the initial render, but this array will be empty, and there's nothing that prohibits us from iterating over an empty array. That's perfectly fine. The only thing is that it won't yield any results. So that's perfectly okay. And the message is an empty string, which also is okay. If I want to display something that is empty, then go ahead and display it. It doesn't really matter. So let's see if we can use this classic app instead of this app component. So here I can just import this component like this, and not use the app component, but rather the classic app component here, like this, and that should pretty much do the trick. We'll see if I made a fool of myself or not. So we're just gonna kick this off. We're starting our Cypress server, and so far life is good. We still have some memory left. Let's see what happens. We are here. User can access application feature. We created it the other day. So let's run this guy. The Cypress runner opens up. And will the shit hit the fan, or? No, it did not. It all worked. Almost everything. We didn't display the sorry, the APA responded. Why not? Why not? Sorry. Message. Right. We forgot to set that. I will just update my classic app. You see, I didn't include that text in my message here, so I just need to do this, and now our test should go green, hopefully. Right, and we have the exact same behavior in our classical class component and our functional component. These two guys are doing exactly the same thing, but in a slightly different way. And in our project that we will be working on, we will be doing that exact same process, but the other way around, because Tassilo, I saw that you have quite a few class components in your project, and so if we want to modernize this, then we will refactor them from classes to functional components. Tassilo says that everything is in class components. All right, Tassilo, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I really had a hard time with hooks. Therefore, thank you so much for this presentation. But I still don't have the answer on like how to work with class components and hooks at the same time. Like if I have a parent which is a class component, how can I integrate a hook component that has a functionality that gives the state to the parent?
You mean underneath, like a child of the class component? Or
exactly. Is that?
Oh yeah, well, so there's nothing that prevents us from mixing those styles if you want to mix it. Like, I'm a great fan of consistency, so I think that ultimately we want to keep everything in functional components, right? But I don't see any reason to I don't see a problem of mixing that. So I can show you an example of this if you want. Let's do that. I mean, let's you know what? Yeah, what we could do is to extract this into another component, right? The things that are about the user themselves. You understand? Because now we are displaying Now we are displaying what? Yeah, all of these stuff just as list items, right? What if we want to do this more uh, we display more details about each user? So we can display that as a separate component. So let me just do that real quickly. Let's say user user.jsx, and that will be a component, and I'm going to make that a functional component. So you remember the acronym, people? Royal Air Force Central Europe, right? Boom, and we have a functional component here. And so I will allow this guy to take props like this, and here I will just I will import this guy here. Import from the same folder. We're gonna import user, and so we're gonna say user here, and here I will say, instead of this list item, I will just say user like this, and then pass in a property, and I would just say user equals user. And now we will have access to a property here that is called user. So I can just return this, and we say, instead of user, we say props.user. And actually, we don't need this for anything, to be honest. We're going to say props.user here. And if we go back to this classical component, I need to set a key here, because otherwise the React library will go nuts. And so if I run my test now, we will have the same result on this guy, right? We see the exact same output. But so that wasn't much of added functionality, right? But let's say that I want to add like his last name, for instance. So I can just do this, props user last name. And if we look at this now, or rerun this, right, we can see that there are last names. My name is not Bluth, so yeah, but you know what I mean. And Anya, I guess you're not Wong either, but that's what we have in our fixture. So that's why we have that. So that is how you extract things. Let's say that you want to have this guy to hold some sort of state. Do you understand? Just to mix things up, and that's perfectly perfectly fine. Like we could say, we can just import use state on this guy, and let's say that we can say const real name or set real name and equals use state, and let's say true, set real name true, right, and then we will say something like we can say something like trying to come up with a good use case here, but so we're gonna import the use effect hook, and then we just say use effect, and then we just clean this up and then here we'll say if props user last name equals Wong, if it equals Wong, then we just say set real name or real name to false, right? False. And then we can just say something like real name question mark and ternary operator, and so we say this is a real last name, and otherwise we say this is not a real last name, something like this. So let's see what it does. So we should probably get rid of this. Let's try this. Right, so here we can see that, you know, in all instances this evaluated to true, apart from in Anya's case, we're just saying that this is not a real last name. Again, this is a nonsense example, but what I wanted to show you is that you can mix both class components and hook, you know, and functional components using hooks in the same application. It doesn't really matter. I don't know if that was a good enough example for you, Tesla, but you know, we are invoking this user component from the class component, and it doesn't really matter at all. You following my drift here? Go ahead.
Yes, like, but if you want to like change the state of the parent, like you could use a function and the parent and send it to the props to the child, but like you cannot do that. You cannot use hooks of the parent, but that's actually clear.
Yes, so if you want to, okay, so let's say that you have a function here. Is that what you're saying? Like for instance, change message, right?
Exactly. If I want to change the message of the parent.
Right. And so we just say change message, and let's just say value here, right? I'm gonna accept this to take a value, and here I just want to say this set state of the message to the value that we are sending in, right? Okay, so here we have this, and you want to pass this this function as a property down to the user component. You can do that by, you know, change message equals, and then we just pass this in. Right, we just say this change message like this, I think. And so here in this user thing, for instance, we can have a button, and then we say on click equals, and then we just say props change, because now it's change message is part of props, right? And now I just want to change, to you clicked on, and then string interpolate user dot first name. Sorry, props user first name. Right. So right. So this should work now. Let's see if it works. The good thing with Cypress is that you can play around with these things and actually. Oh, I didn't give this button a value, so I need to, at least say click me or whatever. Sorry about that. Right. So let's go get over here. There we go. Right. So now if I click on this, on Thomas, for instance, we get an error. Why? A silent error, which is the worst kind of errors. Come on. Inspect. No, come on. What's going on? Okay. Do I have to spin this up? For fuck's sake. Come on, give me a break. Start. Okay, let's spin this up then. We will be done in just a few minutes. But it's a good question. I totally understand. My theory is that yes, you can pass in functions from a class component to a functional component. Definitely. In my opinion, you should be able to do that. Let's see if I wrote something incorrect here. Okay, that's not an error, it's a warning. Let's click on George. Name of undefined. What? First. Oh, sorry. It's first underscore name. Sorry about that. Mea culpa. Right. And what is this state? This set state. This set state is not a function. This set state is not a function. Who is asking questions? Tassila, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, because it was hard for me also to now remember what was actually the case, because I didn't try for so long to implement a functional component with hooks. I think my problem was that, like, my parent component had a submit which uses this.state, like submit the data to the database, and then use this.state like username, and then I had a component which, like, I found in the internet with a calendar, and this calendar was actually like really hard, like it was implemented with hooks. And then I just did not understand how to merge this so that I can get the data from the calendar to the parent, which is like built with like this.state, like how I can merge the data from the child from the calendar to the parent, which uses this.state to access the data to submit it.
Right. That's a very specific question, so I would have to see the code. But I totally see what you're getting at. Let me just see if because I'm doing something wrong here anyway, which is annoying as fuck, as hell. What? This set state is not a function. On what? What is not a function? It is a function. What are you talking about? Sorry. I'm sorry. Let me just. Undefined. What did I miss here? So what is this? Sorry about that. This user. Oh, okay. Okay, I got it. I got it. So I now it all comes back to me. Yeah, you can do this, but you have to say what was it? This bind. Oh shoot. Oh, this bind change. This bind this. This change message. Do I think I need to say? Oh fuck. I totally forgot how to do this. Hold on a second. Bind this React class component. I've done this hundreds of times, but it was so long time ago. This handle bind this handle bind this, right, exactly. So we need to do bind this. Right, okay, so we were getting an error here saying that this set state is not a function because we're invoking this from a functional component and there is no this. So before we send this off, we actually need to bind the class components instance to the method, to the function. So you see now you say you clicked on George and you clicked on Tracy, you clicked on Charles, and so on. So now I can pass this function down to the component. So this button is in the functional component. This message is in the classic app component. Yet we can still modify this. I don't know. I tried that. So the question is if we can use arrow functions, but I don't think I can. So if I remove this now and just use this syntax, this syntax, I don't think it will be the same result. No, you see, it doesn't work. And I might try this, but it won't be the same thing either. No. Call the function. Well, I am calling it on the. I am calling it from the user. I'm calling it from here. So no. So we need to bind this this instance, which I assume is one of the reasons why you probably don't want to mix this too much, because it is a bit confusing, but it's doable. It's definitely doable. So now we can get this. Yeah, please, if you can find another way of doing that, I'll be happy to look at it. But I just can't get it to do. Tassilo, I feel you. We will definitely look into these things. Let me assure you that everything you could do in class components is doable in functional components using hooks nowadays. And you can mix and match them if you need to do that as well. Okay? All right.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Any other questions apart from this weird bind problem? I hope you learned something today about React. I don't know. What do you say, folks?
Yes, and looking forward as always to redo it tomorrow.
On 0.75 or on 1.75?
I think I'll start with 1 as always.
Okay, good stuff.
And then we'll see.
Good stuff, Anja. Thank you very much for that. Guys, I see you on Thursday, if I don't see you before that. And Tassilo, do you have any updates? Did you coordinate with Mirsad? So you guys, are you set up to work together? I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, actually, I think he is on it right now. I told him that we can meet at some point, but he said he will first do it alone and then tell me if he needs me. And until now, I didn't hear anything anymore. So I'm really excited how it's going, and I always want to say like how's it going, but I don't want to stress them, so that's why.
I got you. I got you. No problems. Um, right. I will push this code up to my repo, and I think it's kind of useful to see those two components that are again doing the same thing in a different syntax. And I also look forward to seeing you struggle with this tomorrow, Anya, on your stream. I'm getting shitloads of channel points, so I'm gonna order a new meditation soon, I think.
Oh, awesome.
Mm.
Also, I will be missing Thursday, but I will be back Saturday.
I saw that in Slack. That's perfectly fine. When is the big day?
The big day is actually Saturday in a week, but I already need to go to another place on Thursday, so that's why I can't be there on Thursday.
Absolutely.
And then it will basically be the like the 7th of August and around it. Yes, wedding.
Awesome, awesome. We're all happy for you, and we hope that you will get the best day ever.
We'll see. No.
But it's your first time, right?
I'm a serial wedding killer. Oh,
Okay.
no.
No,
No, it's the first time. First
okay,
time.
yeah. I was actually married once. As an old Catholic boy, I don't believe in divorce, so I can't get married again,
Ah,
unfortunately.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took my time, so hopefully this helps.
If you wait long enough, then the whatever comes is a great reward. Uh, well, then we see you this weekend, hopefully. But take your time, don't stress. We'll manage, of course. And thank you very much for today. I will check out this Medium post. Thank you. Um, yeah, but not today. I need to go, unfortunately. But I will take a look at this, and there will be a link. Well, the code will be pushed up to our GitHub repo with this, so you can find this there. All right, folks. Thank you
Wait,
very much.
you did
Thank you
say
so
some-
much.
Thomas, you mentioned
Thank you so much.
at the beginning. You mentioned a quiz or something.
There will be a quiz at the during the camp. Yes,
On Thursday?
on Thursday when Anya is away, we're gonna make a quiz about her.
Well, after which module will it
We
quiz
haven't
be,
we,
or-
we haven't really decided, but we're nearing then because we did cover React, JavaScript, a little bit of web technologies, and now React. So we have so much underneath our belt that we can do a little bit of testing. And again, if you want to participate in these quizzes and stuff like that, I will set up a few guidelines what sort of work I would like to see, because at the end of the camp I will issue letters of recommendation, but then I need to for you, if you want to use this little training program as in your CV or whatever, for some people this might be useful, but in order for me to recommend somebody I need to see some code written, and so I would set up a few guidelines about that. Okay. But more on that later. All right.
All right.
Take it easy, folks. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. So long.